All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the 2026 U.S. midterms. And look, this isn't just any election. It's shaping up to be a huge clash between what usually happens and the completely chaotic political world we live in right now. So let's break down why this election could be a massive turning point for American politics.
So you might be asking, what is the big deal here? Why is everyone, all the experts, calling this the midterm to watch? Well, it's because the outcome isn't just about who controls Congress for the next couple of years. No, this is about something much bigger, a potential, maybe even permanent shift in the entire country's balance of power.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll kick things off with what history tells us should happen. Then we'll see why today's political map looks so completely different. After that, we'll dive right into the nitty-gritty of the fight for Congress, get to know the wild-card voters who could flip the whole thing on its head, and then finally, we'll talk about what's really at stake here.
All right, let's jump right into our first section, history's midterm test. You know, there's this really powerful, almost predictable historical trend that pretty much every single president has to face. And believe me, it is a tough one. It's a phenomenon called the 6-year itch. And what that means is there's this super well-documented pattern where the party in the White House almost always, and I mean almost always, loses a whole bunch of seats in Congress during that second-term midterm. It's like a built-in political headwind they just can't avoid.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. With President Trump now in his second term, this historical pattern basically screams that the Republican Party should be bracing for some serious losses in 2026. I mean, if history is our only guide, they're facing a really steep uphill battle. But, and this is the big question, is history the only thing that matters this time around?
And that question leads us perfectly into our next section. Because, a lot of analysts out there think that 2026 is absolutely poised to just shatter that historical mold. The political map we're looking at today, it is a whole different beast.
Yeah, this election, it just isn't playing by the old rules. There are so many things making it unique. You've got widespread economic unrest that's changing what voters care about. You have people's party loyalties shifting all over the place. And on top of that, newly redrawn district maps mean some of these races are being fought on completely new turf. And the biggest wildcard of all, the question of who actually shows up to vote is more of a mystery than ever before.
And we're already seeing some signs of this really different environment in the early polls. A few recent surveys actually show Democrats with a solid 6 to 8 point lead over Republicans on a generic ballot. Now, I know it's early, but for this point in the cycle, that's a pretty big deal. That's a lead that makes you sit up and take notice.
So what does all this point to? Well, it could be a massive political realignment. Those traditional party loyalties are fracturing. They're breaking apart. And that's creating brand new battlegrounds in states that we used to think were pretty predictable. We're talking about places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Suddenly, they are way more competitive, and it's all being driven by these huge economic pressures and demographic shifts.
Okay, so how does all of this translate to the actual down and dirty fight for Congress? Let's zoom in and look at the specific battles where control is going to be won or lost.
First up, the House of Representatives. And listen, the margin of control here is just razor thin. For Democrats to take back the majority, they only need to flip 3 seats. Just 3. I mean, stop and think about that for a second. Out of 435 races all across the country, the entire balance of power could come down to what happens in just a handful of districts. That one tiny number puts a massive, massive spotlight on every single competitive race out there.
And a central issue that's really fueling this fight is the president's big budget bill. On one side, you have Republicans who are championing its tax cuts, calling them a key policy win. But on the other side, you've got Democrats campaigning hard on the argument that the bill's deep cuts to programs like Medicaid and SNAP are really going to hurt working families. This clash over policy, it's right at the very heart of the whole campaign.
All right, now let's hop over to the Senate, where the battlefield is somehow even bigger. Get this, a whopping 35 seats are on the ballot in 2026. That is more than a third of the entire Senate. So with that many races in play, in red states, blue states, and of course, those crucial swing states, control of the upper chamber is, well, it's completely up for grabs.
And this isn't just about what happens in Washington, D.C. There are 39 governorships up for grabs, plus a whole bunch of state attorney general races. And these are so important. Why? Because the winners get a huge say in local policies, and, this is the critical part, they'll oversee the next round of redistricting. That's the process that literally shapes political power for the next decade.
So this all brings us to the biggest unknown of all, right? The voters themselves. I mean, polls and history books can only tell you so much. There are 2 key things: turnout
and ticket splitting that could just throw every single prediction right out the window.
And both parties have completely different theories about who is actually going to show up to vote. Democrats are banking on a blue wave, hoping it's driven by their more reliable, traditional midterm voters. Republicans, on the other hand, they're trying something different. They're trying to defy history by nationalizing the election, basically treating it like a mini presidential race to get President Trump's 2024 base fired up and out to the polls.
And then you've got this other fascinating piece of the puzzle, ticket splitting. So what is that? It's basically when a voter decides not to just vote straight down the party line. They might go in and vote for a Republican for the Senate, but then turn around and vote for a Democrat for governor, all in the very same election.
And here is why that matters so much. In those super tight, razor-thin swing districts we were just talking about, these are the voters who are often the deciding factor. They are the ultimate wild card. These are the folks who could single-handedly tip the balance of power in Congress all on their own.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together and tackle the final and most crucial question. What is really at stake here? Because this isn't just another election cycle. No, this is being framed as a massive referendum on the entire future direction of the country.
For starters, whatever happens in 2026 is going to immediately set the stage for the 2028 presidential race. Whichever party comes out on top gets all the momentum. They get the power and they get to shape the national story as we head into that next huge contest.
Second, and we touched on this earlier with the state races, the outcome is going to have a direct impact on the next round of redistricting. Remember, that's the process of drawing the congressional maps, and it will basically determine which party has a built-in structural advantage in the House of Representatives for the next decade. A whole decade.
And finally, if you zoom out to the really big picture, this election could truly mark the beginning of a whole new era in politics. Whether it cements this realignment of party coalitions we're seeing, or it completely changes how campaigns are run from now on, the impact of 2026 could be something we feel for a generation to come.
Which really just leaves us with this one final thought. The 2026 midterms are shaping up to be this epic collision between powerful historical forces and a uniquely chaotic political moment. So the ultimate question really is, will those old patterns hold true? Will history repeat itself? Or are we about to watch the rules of American politics get completely rewritten right before our very eyes?